Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And today I wanted to talk about some recent videos, some recent articles rather, that have been coming out. Some of them on blog posts, some of them in other places. Most notably, today the one that finally said, okay, that's it, I'm going to mention this, is on the Mary Sue. I think part of it might be because is it still Pride Month? I guess it is still Pride Month right now. And so you've got a lot of the SJWs trying to weaponize this and take advantage of it and whatnot. But anyways, the basic gist of these articles that I've been seeing, that have been promoted on Twitter, that people have been pushing around, is this idea that the D&D hobby was always hostile to women and to LGBT people and so on and so forth. Until just very, very recently. And now, thank goodness that is over, right? And that they're finally allowing women to play, right? Because they were never allowed to play before now. And that they're finally, permitting gay people to play, because there weren't any gay people playing D&D from like the 1970s onwards, right? The D&D, according to this mythology that they have created up around themselves, was apparently the abode of straight white male conservative Christian high school jocks, that had militarist leanings and were secretly Klans members from its inception in 1974 until sometime around the beginning of the current year, right? And then all of a sudden, it's now magically been transformed thanks to the wonder of progressive ultra-leftist communist policies, right? That's the fantasy that these articles are peddling. So, I wanted to point out to you here, this is Arrows of Indra. It's the first RPG rulebook that has a transgender character on the cover, a transgender heroic character. I think any transgender character, but definitely a heroic transgender character on the cover. And it's an OSR game, and I wrote it. So there you are, right? And I wrote it before 5th edition came out, so it was already kind of... It was already there before 5th edition came and created a safe environment for LGBT people. I mean, this is just the most absurd claim these people could possibly make. I know, going back all the way to the start, I started playing D&D when I was like 11 or 12, right? I think I sort of tried once when I was 11, then it didn't happen again until like almost a year later when I was at the very beginning of middle school, right? It seems like a very long time ago, because it was. It was a very long time ago. And, although at that time I didn't know it, even back there was someone in that gaming group that, I am quite sure is very, very likely today to have been an LGBT person. And there were women in that gaming group, right? The very first gaming group. And in every gaming group since, I'm pretty sure that there has been too, right? I mean, I've mostly gamed, I gamed in junior high, I gamed in high school, and in that environment, in junior high and in high school, the people that gamed, I mean, it was a little bit different from one to the other, because at the very beginning, I came in just at the end of the period where D&D was still mainstream popular. And mainstream popular, obviously, it didn't mean that the jocks and the popular girls were the ones playing it. They weren't, right? This idea that somehow D&D was under the control of the people of privilege and that they were the ones excluding everyone else from it, it's just so absurd. It's so absurd, right? But I will tell you what it was. In the very early period of D&D was the domain of the guys who like to make really heavy metal style fantasy art. We had a lot of headbangers and a lot of stoners who were playing D&D. I was a punk, right? And we had, and I was in junior high the most nerdy kid playing D&D. Everybody else who was playing in my group was, relatively speaking, less nerdy than me. By the time I was in high school, I was by far the least nerdy person in my group. Everybody was nerdier than me. So what happened is D&D lost its mainstream appeal even to like groups, because it was never right down the middle, right? You never had the jock and the popular girl playing D&D. What you did have were a different variety of outcasts. And for a while, you had like the bad boys, the bad kids were the ones that played D&D. And I came in on that, the end of that wave. And then by the time I was in high school, just a couple of years later, the bad boys didn't play D&D anymore. Only the really nerdy kids did, right? But even there, among those really nerdy kids, you can be absolutely sure, I know for a fact, there were really nerdy kids in the gaming group I played in, and probably in the gaming group almost everyone played in, who were LGBT. There at the time I was in high school, because it was a different age, they weren't out yet, right? But they were. And I had girls in my gaming group, like I said, since junior high and onwards, right? In high school there was... I'm not going to name names, but there was a girl in my high school that gamed with me that ended up becoming a pretty successful reporter, and she was in my gaming group. And then when I went into university, who played D&D? Well, there was kind of always two crowds of kids that played D&D. Yes, there were like the STEM kids, the engineering students, who were almost all guys, though they might have had a girl or two anyway, but I wasn't involved in them. I was a history major, and most of the people in my gaming group in university were guys that were doing, they were drama students or English students, or a couple of education students, plus a couple of, like, I guess you'd call townies. That term doesn't apply that much at the U of A, but guys who weren't in university at all, but went to the university gaming club to game, right? And again, there was a number of women, a number of people who were LGBT. That was the point at which there were people that were out as LGBT at that time. But this has always been, D&D has always been the place for people who were marginalized, right? They were always there, and they'd always participated in it, and they'd always been welcome in it. And in fact, the complaint that was made for many years, including by me, of D&D as a hobby was not that it was exclusive, that it was too too prejudiced, and that it only allowed certain people in. It was, if anything, what we called back then the geek social fallacy, which was that because we were so super welcoming, we were welcoming to everybody because we had been people that were outsiders ourselves. I'm not going to pretend that I was ever a really horribly persecuted kid. I wasn't, right? But I do know people in my group that absolutely were. I knew kids that were, just so nerdy that they were picked on constantly, that they were constantly outcasts, right? I knew the new kids that had come in, like immigrant kids. This was Canada, right? We always had immigrant kids, and nobody cared. We have no problem with immigrants in Canada, right? We had, so we had gamers of color that were present there, right? And we had, girls that didn't really fit the mold of the like high school cheerleader type were there, right? Smart girls, artsy girls, all sorts. And they were all welcome, right? And they were all welcome, and in part because we all had this understanding of how people had been picked on, so to say, we tended, if anything, to be far too forgiving of people that showed up with really, really odious personal habits, right? Like people that didn't bathe, right? People that didn't know not to take other people's stuff, right? People that didn't know how to make appropriate levels of volume use or touching or all kinds of stuff, right? And that we would like sort of just be quiet about it and not call it out because we didn't want to offend anyone, because we didn't want to be seen as people who excluded. Gamers never excluded anyone, right? So you get these these stories, like this article in the Mary Sue of a woman who is recalling the first time she tried to play D&D and she went into a gaming store. Now, first of all, that's your first mistake, right? If you're going into a gaming store, and I admit it could be a typical rookie mistake, right? One would think, where can I find someone that will show me how to play D&D? Well, I'll go to the gaming store. But of course, in real life, the gaming store is the place where people went who were so odious that they had no other groups to play in, right? Like that's, I mean, at least in my experience, in every gaming group I've encountered, that was how it went, right? If you were not invited into any other group, you just go to the gaming store on open night and play with whoever else, whatever else absolute reject you could get there, right? So that these were weird kids, there would be no doubt, right? But here, the author of this article is saying she goes in there and she goes around the corner to where they're playing, and then suddenly they freeze, like they don't understand what she is, right? Because she's a woman, right? Well, okay, so maybe that's true. Maybe that actually happened. I can't be sure because SJWs always lie, right? But let's pretend it was her second. That was the worst thing that happened to her, and she just said, okay, well, I'm never going to play now, right? And then apparently it was years until she played again or something like that. Like that's her proof that gaming has historically excluded women, which is absolute abject nonsense, right? There have been women gamers, there have been LGBT gamers, there have been minority gamers of all kinds, right? Of all kinds since forever. And this notion that what they're trying to push is this idea that this exclusion was happening in the past and that now, thanks to the efforts of the SJWs, there's this opening up happening. No, wrong. Right? That is not what's happening at all. What is happening is that you're seeing a group of particular activists that are in this self-feeding little group of social media publicity making that are promoting each other and doing so at the cost of history and at the cost of making everyone else think that gaming was and still might be intolerant for them. So what they're actually doing is scaring away people who might otherwise think it's safe to play RPGs. And instead you're driving them out by creating this fantasy that if your gaming group, if there's a white male in your gaming group, well, that's it, you're going to be attacked or something like that, right? Like some kind of absolute nonsense that has never happened, right? And the way that they've now supposedly fixed the problem is actually horrible because they've created a monoculture where they've said, if you don't act like we do, if you don't support what we do, if you don't say what we do, if your settings don't look like a culture that we want to force on the world, then even their settings, right, then you are the one that we're going to try to get rid of, right? Like in this article, I don't remember if it's this article or another article. I don't want to misquote it, but so it might not be the Mary Sue article. It might be some other one. It says something like, oh, and isn't it wonderful that in the current guide to Waterdeep or the current Waterdeep adventure or whatever, you go into a store in one of the parts of it and someone asks you by your preferred pronouns, right? Well, no, that's not wonderful. That's stupid, right? That's absolutely stupid. That's just removing all sense of the exotic from a fantasy world, because this is the sort of nonsense that would happen in Seattle in 2019. It's not the sort of nonsense that was supposed to happen in Waterdeep, right? It's just ridiculous. It's like as if you tried to make Game of Thrones have 2019, political moral values, right? It's like if you try to do that to Shakespeare, right? These are people who want to erase history. They want to erase all culture, and what they want to have is only the one monoculture of Big Brother, or in this case, I guess it's like Big Transistor or something like that, right? They want to make a claim that unless everyone does exactly what they want to do and makes the games that they want made and make their campaigns look like they tell you to make them, then somehow there's prejudice happening, and that's just not true. Right, all those kids I mentioned, all the gay kid, the immigrant kid, the girls, everyone who played all through high school, all through junior high, all through my university years, all through my adult years, right? In every case, what they played, what they liked playing, what they were there to play was D&D. They liked the Forgotten Realms to be a place of sword and sorcery and a place where life was, kind of brutish, right? And where there was, where there was cultured people, it was that kind of pseudo-medieval culture. They liked a world where there was, intrigue and backstabbing. They didn't want it to be like a CalArts, animated TV show, right? And it's the same thing when I came to South America. No one in South America wants to role play a game that respects their Latino culture. They want to play fucking Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and Vampire, right? They don't give a shit about the things you people are trying to politicize, right? They only want to game. And we, the gamers, everybody else, we only care that you game. We don't care anything about what, nobody's doing a litmus test for your skin color, for what you have in your pants, for who you're trying to get into the pants of, or anything else. We just want you to game. That's it. We will judge you not by the color of your skin, but by the content of your character sheet. And that's the message we should be sending out to people. We should be welcoming them all. And you know what? If you want to have a Waterdeep where people ask you your preferred pronouns and where there's pride parades on the streets of Waterdeep and everyone's super mega nice and oh my god, so random, you go right go right ahead. That's fine. Even that we don't care about. No one cares if you have a sword dream. We care that you're going to try to use it to stab us in the back and attack our games and kick us out of the hobby that we made, right? And it's not because you're the marginalized that we're picking on. You are no longer the marginalized. You are the popular kids, right? In social media, you are the favored and protected class who are defended by all of the social media monopolies, right? You are the ones in popular news media, in academia, in every area of the cultural world that are designated the in crowd. The jock and the high school cheerleader have more claim of being marginalized people these days than you, okay? You're the ones that have the power, and we know that you have the power because someone like you, someone like Sarah Jong, for example, can say, kill all white men, right? She can make posts, she can make tweet after tweet about killing white men, and she'll be praised by Twitter. She'll get a blue check mark, right? But if someone is slightly critical of the idea that we have to ask people their pronouns before we address them, they get banned from Twitter, right? They get demonetized. They get kicked out, right? You're the ones in power. That makes you the popular ones. Well, it doesn't make you popular with the regular people, but it makes you popular with the establishment. You are the ones that have the power, the influence. The same way that nobody really liked the jock or the cheerleader. They were horrible, shallow, pathetic people that everyone hated. And it probably ultimately went on to live a fairly unfulfilling life because they were so catered to and so shallow in high school, right? They never had a chance to develop into anything interesting. Just like you people, the SJWs have no chance of ever developing into anything interesting. You're just basically parasites. So I guess that on that note, that pretty much closes out my rant for today. I think that was a pretty good one, wasn't it? So if you like that, please subscribe. Please hit the notification bell. Please hit like. And share this video. Let other people see it. Let other people hear the truth about what gaming is. Gaming is super inclusive. My gaming group is super inclusive. And if mine is, everybody's is, right? Because I'm supposedly their big bad guy, right? Well, I've got all sorts of people. All races, all genders, all sexualities, even all political views are at my table. I've even got a communist playing in my DCC game. So there's no means by which we are exclusive. We only care that you game. Isn't that right? Yeah, she only cares that you game too. So, if you want to support me in my work, in my social media, you want to encourage me to make more videos, to make some more live streams and things like that, besides subscribing and sharing, be sure to support me by checking out my products. You can check out Arrows of Indra, which, by the way, there is not a single white person in Arrows of Indra. Right? It's an RPG about epic fantasy India, and it's set up to play in a complete in a world based on the great Indian epic myths. Dark Albion. Well, there are white people in there, right? Because that's medieval England. Or you can feel free to pick up my RPG Pundit Presents PDF material, which is source books that come out there just like, you know, they range from 99 cents to $4.99, and they have all kinds of really neat material that you can use in any kind of an OSR D&D game. The emphasis, it tends to be either on medieval authentic or gonzo stuff. The one coming out probably by the time this video is out, the latest one is going to be 100 medieval authentic town features, right? So it's got a table of 100 detailed in like small paragraphs, 100 different weird things that are all from real medieval history or folklore that you can put into random towns or villages, real random, fantasy towns or villages that your characters might travel to. It makes an awesome random table, helps make your small towns and villages and cities more interesting. And there's some really crazy and weird stuff in there, and it's all based on real history. So be sure to check that out. If you're not into that, check out the last one, Ancient Complexes of the Ancients. It's a series of tables for you to design super high-tech ruins in a fantasy game, gonzo fantasy style campaign. So it's got that really weird fantasy vibe to it. You make these dungeon complexes that are actually ancient bases and military bases and science bases and things like that are full of old and new perils, and also the promise of incredible super tech that your PCs might be able to find if they survive. And if those two don't satisfy you, check out any of the other 80 RPG Pundit Presents books. I'm not going to stop until someone can say, you know what, RPG Pundit Presents is pretty good, but I like the first 100 supplements a lot better than the second 100. Like that's where I want to be with this series. So check it out, though. That's a great way to support me and get something back. If you really don't want to get something back, there's a link to a PayPal button. You can just go and PayPal me some cash, or you can subscribe to me on Patreon. Also, check out the fact that I now have a BitChute account. I'm not going to post any original material on there. It's just the backup for this one, in case the SJWs manage to get me kicked off. I guess that's it for today. Again, share the video everywhere. That's the primary thing. Share the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel. The more you do that, the better it is for me. And I thank you so much to everyone who has. Currently smoking Italian Red Bark plus Argento Latacchia.